Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 9th of July 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. I've got Mike Robinson with me in the studio behind the technical desk, as we are going to be joined by John Hurst, who will be giving us an update of the trials and tribulations of Guy Taylor. And later in the programme, we're also going to be joined by Justin Walker, who's going to be giving an update on the Bradbury Pound efforts at the budget. Before we go there, a quick couple of words on the weather as always, and I'm delighted to say it's sunny in Glasgow, so good news north of the border. What else have we got? Sorry, Glasgow cloudy, I beg your pardon, Glasgow cloudy, but sunny in Rhondda, and pretty sunny here in Plymouth. We've got a summer's day finally, so it's looking better across the country. Well, before we just talk to John Hurst about serious matters of Guy Taylor, John, where are you?
Well, we're taking the opportunity to visit the Fleet Air Arm Museum at Yeovilton, which is right next to a Royal Naval Air Station. I noticed the Harrier, our aircraft carrier launched aircraft, is now in the museum. But the Royal Navy, I'm pleased to say, has got at least 5 Merlin helicopters, the big rescue jobbies that have replaced the Sea King. They're flying around the airfield practicing bumps and stops and that sort of thing.
Okay, well, that's very encouraging that Britain's carrier-borne aircraft are in the museum. Of course, David Cameron has been waxing lyrical over the last few days. Don't worry, everything's under control. Britain's armed forces are fine. Well, we know the truth, which is that they are being cut to dangerous levels. But you've mentioned the Harrier there. Let's just have a look at the F-35, which is supposed to be coming into service on board Britain's newest and latest Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers. We've pointed out this aircraft is simply not performing, and there was some documents released about a week ago which showed that this aircraft was drastically underperforming in aerial dogfight scenarios. Surprise, surprise, there's been a big article here in the Telegraph where a former RAF group captain, who is now working with Lockheed, says, oh, don't take any notice of the criticism because it's a really good aircraft. Well, let's have a look at what he had to say. He says it's an agile aircraft, it has the speed, and it can pull a 9G turn like an F-16. Well, that's a pretty interesting comment, since it's supposed to be better than an F-16. And then he gets into the meat of it. It would be trite to say dogfights are over, but if an F-35 got into a dogfight situation, then the pilot would probably have done something wrong. We think what Mr. Linstead really means is that the F-35 can't perform even before it enters service. And of course, it's still not in service. So this is the efforts of David Cameron's Conservative government. He talks war overseas, ramping up war with Russia. Meanwhile, he can't even get a carrier-borne aircraft serviceable at sea that can perform. Do you think this incompetence is by accident, John? Or do you think there's design?
Well, you know what they say, once is misfortune, twice is careless, 3 times is enemy action, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, we'll put down David Cameron as an enemy. I think that's fairly easy to do. And we just thought we'd flag up this before we let you speak, and that is, of course, the Goddard child abuse inquiry starts today. Mike, you found this. We shouldn't be worried, apparently.
Well, the question is whether the Goddard inquiry is going to report before the F-35 is in service, and that's looking, well, it's hard to say because it looks like they're both going to take as long to get a result out of. The child, she says that this is likely to last until 2020. That smacks of cover-up to me. Sort of, let's not bring any criminal investigations in the meantime, because the Goddard inquiry is going on. We'll just leave it expanding and expanding and expanding, and it may run on for longer. Or just like certain other inquiries happen, it may never report.
Yeah, it's a washing machine on a pretty long programme, and the idea is that people get bored of hearing about it. It drifts into the long grass, and then what she produces in 2020 will be irrelevant. John, just one quick comment, if you like, on that, and then we'll get on to Guy Taylor.
Well, Brian, you and I visited Glastonbury did do it yesterday, and we've come up with a cunning plan to circumvent the court secrecy. I'll write an article. Well, I'm partway through writing it, I'll publish it. We think we've come up with a cunning plan. It all hinges on the concept of voidness, because if court proceedings are irregular, they're void, and they can't enforce any contempt of courts. So we won't count our chickens before it's too late, but we have come up with a cunning plan to investigate these things more promptly.
Right, okay, excellent. Well, I'll just bring his face up on screen for viewers who may not have seen him before, but Guy Taylor bravely has been battling corruption in the courts. A lot of that to do with the fact he's had personal property stolen from him, and he's had a pretty tough time in court recently. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, well, Guy appeared at Hereford Magistrates Court on Monday and Tuesday this week. He deliberately contrived to get himself arrested for criminal trespass, because what he did, he brought his civil matter into the criminal. I'm sorry to say, against the weight of the evidence, the judge convicted him. It's a fairly minor charge, so I don't think there's too much to worry about penalty-wise. But Guy managed to get as much material as possible in with the view to an appeal. Now, an appeal from a conviction in the Magistrates Court, as you know, is held in a Crown Court with a judge and 2 magistrates. They're fairly relaxed affairs in comparison with the more formal trials. But again, it's a question of getting the material in is necessary going up the food chain. You can't appeal against an appeal unless there's an irregularity. And basically, Guy's position is that it's very similar to Tom Crawford, in actual fact. Guy takes out a loan, pays it for a year, and then suddenly notices the amount has gone up. So he queries it, and he discovers that, lo and behold, the bank manager dealing with it had taken out another loan, forged Guy's signature, paid off the first, and collected even more money. That's the allegation. And as you know from the work on void orders by Shirley Leewald, the solicitor advocate, nothing can be built on nothing. So the whole episode of Guy being arrested is fundamentally based on this fraud by the bank. The trial was a useful exercise because Guy exercises his power to call witnesses. He called a lady from the county court who was the delivery manager, I think she described herself as, and she described a fairly ramshackle computer system where there aren't sufficient codes on it for all the transactions they do. So they changed them. So she said one code in fact means something else because we can't put that first one in. All very unsatisfactory. The way county courts are run is the responsibility of county court judges. That's confirmed in the County Courts Act 1984. So that's one lady that needs to be held to account. The next chief witness that Guy called was one of the partners in UK Evict. Now, sharp intake of breath, UK Evict, not one of the most popular companies. He exposed himself as a bully and a blusterer. Not a credible witness in my professional opinion. He claimed that although the warrant that was actually used and served on Guy on the day he was evicted in Bath Manor had glaring errors, no date, no proper stamp, the wrong court issuing it, it was perfectly fine, and he'd be quite happy to do it again. Well, we're going to hold him to account for that because he revealed that the warrants are typed out along with the application form for the warrant by a firm of solicitors. And that firm has got professional negligence insurance. So I dare say Guy will be seeking to claim on that because the whole thing started, but certainly the rest started because the warrant was clearly wrong. The judge didn't rule on whether it was right or wrong. He ruled on whether Guy should have known. That was the test because the test for criminal trespass is occupier should trespass knowing or ought to have known that you were a trespasser. Guy clearly argued he wasn't first principles and that the whole thing was void because the bank cheated in the first place. But the judge wasn't prepared to address that. But the appeal court may well have to because Guy will certainly raise it. He raises evidence about the being cheated by the bank verbally, but he's got a mass of supporting documents, and we're going through those and submitting them as part of his appeal.
John, is it possible to get justice anymore?
The judge was clearly embarrassed and scuttled out of the room, having given his dodgy verdict the way they do. There was a fair amount of audience participation, shall we say? Yeah. They only had about 15 people in the court, but there was a lot of intakes of breath. If it had been like you know Olympic ice skating, where the judges have paddles with numbers on, we were thinking of doing that because consistently the witnesses were very poor and would have got very low marks. The detective constable in the case was exposed as a person who hadn't investigated the matter properly. You've heard me talk about viable lines of inquiry required to be investigated. He didn't. And the most fundamental error that was apparent was that at one point, the first judge to deal with it, Judge Cadbury, issued an unless order to require the case file from the county court to be produced. And District Judge Piers Higgins of the county court said no, and the file never was produced. The lady manager was produced, and all she could say was, "This is what we normally do, and this is our procedure, and of course we post things out properly and that sort of thing." But because there was no file, again, Guy was vindicated. There appeared to be no proper file and no proper file keeping. It was all hearsay. So that's another avenue of complaint. The record keeping in the court system and the computer system is, according to a witness you should know, the court delivery manager, unsatisfactory.
Yeah. John, this is the state of the court system at the moment. I sort of give a wry smile at this point because I still see articles and comment on the internet where people sort of talk about they talk about the authorities and say, well, of course the matter went into court, so it's quite clear that this happened and that happened. And I really want to say say again.
Yeah, go on.
I just want to say to our audience, please take the opportunity to get into court, go in as a member of the public and actually listen what takes place in the court. And it's quite remarkable when you start to hear hearsay being accepted as evidence. That goes on all the time in family court hearings. But we're now seeing that basically the courts are out of control here. This is very serious if we've got judges simply not doing their job in a case, and we've got police officers not doing their job, and then there's a judgment made which is clearly a fraudulent judgment because it's not based on the truth or facts. Really, we're in a position where we're seeing law and order starting to break down in this country, John, aren't we?
Well, we are, because we're the respectable end of the wake market. I mean, I've talked about vigilantism and that sort of thing. I dare say it's happening elsewhere. The issue is the rule of law, isn't it? And it's clearly no longer applies. It applies for one side but not for the other. And eventually somebody's got to give. What the tipping point will be, I don't know. The weight of the evidence was so in favour of Guy. He didn't know. He was quite sure that he'd been cheated, and we know that fraud vitiates everything, it undermines everything. But the courts didn't accept that. They only looked at the narrow issue of this paperwork was incorrect, but there was a court order, but he wasn't told about it. The judge has got a lot to answer for. He knows he did the wrong thing, and he scuttled out.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll be severely criticised. The best news I've heard in the court front is the Wangilly decision, which I don't many know about. Wangilly is a chap who lives in a northern town. He wasn't married to a former WPC. He was falsely accused of being involved in a fight in the street. When he had ample alibis, he had four sources of witness, 3 live witnesses in the video to say he wasn't there. As he was charged, kept on bail for 3 years. His wife was basically hounded out of the police force, and he couldn't keep up with his mortgage payments, lost his house, and it came to a head in court earlier this week, and he was completely vindicated, and the judge issued a 20-minute criticism. This case should never have gone to court, and he wants the option in case investigated, and all sorts. So it's not entirely black. The Wangilly case is a good example of British justice, but a poor example of British police at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much for that report, John. Just got a couple of brief comments on the police. First of all, Mike, you picked up on Hogan Howe's, what I called his spaghetti western, that the BBC desperately trying to big up the Metropolitan Police at the moment.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say I did watch this. It was a bit like, I can't really describe how bad it was actually, but I just thought I would have a look and see just what the quality of this was. And frankly, I'm sorry, John, and I know you're ex-police and all that, but if this is the quality of the people that are being brought through Hendon at the moment, we really are in trouble.
What I always say is that I didn't leave the police. The police left me years ago.
Right. Okay. Well,
Okay,
just
absolutely shocking. Anyway, so if anybody gets a chance to watch it on iPlayer or something, do so just to see how bad it is.
BBC Met Police Spaghetti Western. We know the on-screen shot is not Bernard Hogan Howe from the Met Police, but we just want...
Sorry, John, there was just one thing actually that I thought I would ask you to comment on, because during the passing out parade at Headingley, they did ask, everybody was given the oath to say, and actually Hogan Howe repeated his oath. And I just thought that was quite an interesting little development. So he is on video as repeating his oath of office, which is something he doesn't seem to be living by at the moment.
Well, strictly speaking, the chief constable isn't a constable; that he's a magistrate. But there we go. Of course, it's the post-1996 oath, I dare say, which is very, very dubious. You've read my article on that, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's in my document on bailiffs.
Yes.
It's very dubious. It's a wishy-washy to oath to statute, and of course, statute can be changed by the next passing politician. So we really should hold them to the common law oath.
Yeah. Right, okay, I'll just come back in there and just explain. We know that this on-screen shot is not of Bernard Hogan Howe, but we thought this sentiment by this police officer was very significant. He was saying some weeks ago Britain could drift towards a police state, and now we've got Hogan Howe himself saying that, well, if you're a police officer and you shoot somebody, you shouldn't really have to go through the boring process of some sort of inquiry. You should just be able to get on with your job. We tweeted out yesterday that probably Bernard Hogan Howe is the most dangerous police officer in the country, because following his spaghetti western, he wants to get out there with his six-shooter and a license to kill. But where does this stuff go? This was sent to us about 2 years ago, I think now, and somebody picked up on the fact that we were training up junior police community support officers, and by junior we mean very junior. But these youngsters were being sent out on the streets to question adults, and the person had said, isn't there a remarkable similarity with what was happening in Nazi socialist Germany, where young children were being put into uniforms, and of course that ultimately led to the Hitler Youth. So maybe that's a bit hard, maybe not. John, any final comments? Are you about to visit one of Britain's Air Force Harriers in the museum?
Yeah, I am. Yes, indeed. Yes, but I'm here because my father was in the Fleet Air Arm during the war, basically. So I'm showing my respect. He died a couple of years ago, and I've never been here before. There we are.
Okay.
As far as load recruiting standards, well, it all goes back to a thing called the Sheehy Report, which is about 20 years ago now. Mr. Sheehy was a supermarket proprietor of some sort, employed by the Home Office to reassess what sort of people should be recruited for police work, and he came to the conclusion that the skill set of a lady at the till in the supermarket was sufficient for a policeman. Strangely enough, that's probably why he got the job, and of course it's not true. Standards have dropped, and it's showing. Brian, we did meet a young policeman a few days ago, didn't we? We asked what his role was like, and he said, well, there wasn't any. And he explained how the training in the Met had gone down from sort of 4 months, 12-hour days with homework and loads of exams to a fairly casual 9 to 5 non-residential computer-aided learning system. So recruits are coming out, with a fraction of the knowledge they had before.
Yeah.
And of course, with that knowledge, you got no power.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that excellent report on the road. We will have you back on pretty soon. Enjoy the rest of your time at the museum. Well, let's get on with the UK column. We just like to say that if you like what we're doing at the moment, we'd be very grateful if you consider taking out a subscription or making a donation to us. And of course, the new website seems to have gone down particularly well. A lot of people giving us very good feedback on that. And I'd also like to say thank you very much to all those viewers and listeners who've been helping Melanie Shaw. There's been about £1,300 raised for her so far, and without your help we couldn't be keeping Melanie accommodated and also providing very basic things for her, because she's needed clothes and she's needed personal effects. None of this could have happened without your support, so thank you very much. It's very kind. I think we need to move on to a remarkable piece of video which features President Obama. And I'd invite viewers and listeners to listen very carefully to what the president says, because he's made an extraordinary announcement.
But the fall of Ramadi has galvanized the Iraqi government. So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar.
So yes, if you didn't catch that, he said we're speeding up the funding of ISIL forces. And now, of course, this little video clip has come from Next News Network, so we've got to thank them for that. And they're asking, is this a Freudian slip? What do you think, Brian?
Well, I don't think it is. I asked you that question when I first found out about the video, but when you consider the deliberation that he makes this statement, and also the fact that he's using some form of prompting system, an accident if it was an off-the-cuff remark, but this seems to have been scripted. And so we seem to have finally an admission that it is the Americans, amongst others, who are actually supporting the very terrorists that we are supposed to be so frightened of, because they're going to murder us in our beds. And maybe we can reinforce this idea a bit more with an article from Veterans Today. Thank you very much to the person who pointed this out to us. I think it was Adrian. Well done, Adrian. So look at the headline. ISIS German-run Patriot air defence system hijacked in Turkey. German missile battery receives orders from unknown hackers. Now, the initial part of this is that there's been a suggestion that these very sophisticated Patriot ground-to-air missiles operated by the German army in Syria, in Turkey on the Syrian border, were hijacked, and somebody unknown was giving these systems commands. Now, I find this very difficult to believe, because if this has been achieved, it means that none of the existing cryptology systems for NATO for the Germans are valid, which would be a fundamental and massive security breach. So I think something else is going on here. I think really what this is saying, that somebody else other than normal governments is actually giving these missile systems the instruction. So Mike, if we just pop that one back briefly, let's add a bit more of the comment from that article. Editor's note: it's now clear it is Germany shooting at Syrian planes and helicopters attacking ISIS positions. Why are the Germans in Turkey? What could their mission possibly be? There is little doubt that Germany is providing an air umbrella over al-Nusra and ISIS forces. Who has the power to make them do that? Now, I think this is where the suggestion of hacking comes from. Russia today, the German Patriot air and missile defence systems stationed at the Turkish border with Syria have carried out unexplained commands allegedly issued by unknown hackers, according to a German media report, since rebutted by the German government. It goes on to say that US-produced missile systems belonging to the German Bundeswehr armed forces and based on the territory of NATO's ally Turkey since 2013 have been compromised. And that was a report in the German Spiegel. So if we think this through, this is very, very serious indeed, because what we are now starting to see is, while our own governments tell us that, of course, the Islamic State, ISIS, al-Nusra, etc. are operating against us as terrorists, what is actually happening on the ground is that our own public money is being used to support those terrorists. And now we're getting a suggestion both from the American president himself that this is the case, and we're getting a further strong hint from this story that German Patriot systems have been used to help defend ISIS forces on the ground. So is this possible? Well, what we'd like to do is to take you back to the story of Conservative MP Brooks Newmark. And while I'm taking you through this, I think we'll be trying to get Justin Walker online. And at the end of this section, we'll see if we can bring Justin in for some comment. Well, here we go. Probably some of you will remember this, which splashed all over the headlines. Tory minister quits over sex photos. And this is Brooks Newmark, who was busy tweeting pictures of himself, his naked body, to young ladies. Eventually, it all broke surface, and he had to stand down for the good of his family, you'll understand. Well, this was a little bit of stuff and nonsense, but we want to look at it a rather different way, because here's the quality of the man who was busy sending out pictures of himself in the buff. Turn away if you're of a weak disposition. What we were interested in is this is the same man who was boasting of his meetings with those linked to Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra terrorists. So this was at the time when David Cameron was warning how dangerous Al-Qaeda was, and indeed how dangerous associated terrorist groups like Al-Nusra were, but he was an MP who had clear links. Well, part of the story was reported here in the Essex Chronicle, and if we have a look at the insert, it says, on Sunday night, Mr. Newmark travelled to the Turkish-Syrian border to meet with rebel fighters, including General Idris of the Free Syria Army on Monday, then to visit a makeshift hospital for wounded soldiers at Rayalani 2 days later. And it says that since his return, that's since Brooks Newmark's return, he's spoken of his sadness and regret that fellow MPs have given the green light to President Assad to continue using chemical weapons. Now, of course, his beef there is the fact that while he was away, there was that historic vote in Parliament where MPs finally voted not to attack Assad and Syria. And this upset Mr. Newmark deeply, to the extent that he felt he had to apologise to General Idris. Now, the date of that article was August the 30th, 2013. Where does it take us? Well, interestingly enough, if I just put that on the bottom there, a more detailed story was also published in the Daily Mail. And the UK column team took great interest in the Daily Mail story, because it was in that article that Brooks Newmark was boasting not only had he met General Idris, but that General Idris's Free Syrian Army was directly connected to Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra. Well, Brooks Newmark was a busy boy over the period, not only sending out explicit photographs of himself, but he was busy tweeting that he'd had a busy day meeting the Syrian opposition, including General Idris and President Saba. And then he says Assad's 14th chemical weapons attack is a tipping point in the civil war. Now, we had tackled Brooks Newmark in person, asking him for his evidence of chemical attacks by Brooks Newmark. By President Assad. He could provide no evidence at all. He simply referred to other documents widely available on the website, saying possibly, could, maybe, might have. So a lot of spin going directly into the Daily Mail article, to the extent we challenged it. And first of all, we emailed Mr. Newmark himself. He failed to respond. On September the 11th, 2013, I personally emailed my local MP, Gary Streeter, another Tory, and asked that he obtained a full and proper reply to the questions put to Brooks Newmark. And what we asked him was, what were the names of the individuals and their status organisations that were present in the meetings that Mr. Newmark attended with General Idris? And we just got a complete load of rubbish back from Gary Streeter. He wouldn't answer the question, but he tried to fob us off by saying Syria appears to be moving in a different direction. Things were moving on. So Tory Gary Streeter looked after his little Tory friend in the buff, didn't want to answer serious questions about was the British government supporting terrorist organisations overseas. Well, we didn't stop there. We sent a letter to the local Conservative Association because we wanted a proper answer. So we repeated the questions, essentially hard copy letter. And of course, we received no reply from Streeter of any substance. What were these Tory MPs so frightened of? We think it was this rather. And think about this in line with what you've just heard the American president say, that they are supporting these terrorist organisations. So in his remarks to the Daily Mail, Brooks Newmark said this, if I just highlight it: there are about 150,000 Free Syrian Army fighters and 7,500 Jabhat al-Nusra fighters which have links with al-Qaeda. And I'm stressing the links to al-Qaeda. So why would a Conservative MP be freely admitting that the man he met, General Idris, was linked through to al-Nusra terrorists and al-Qaeda? The story got more interesting because a short time later, the Daily Mail had then taken steps to hide this article. This is the screenshot showing that when you searched for the article, this is the comment: at the request of the publisher or their representative, this historical cached copy has been blocked. We think there's some pretty dirty dealing going on at the moment, and it appears to be that the British government is lying not only to the British nation, but of course to countries overseas, while saying we should be very frightened of terrorist organisations. It would appear from what we see that it is actually the British government and partners supporting those organisations. Global Research was also at the time picking up what was going on, and it pointed out that on August the 13th, 14th, 2013, Western-sponsored opposition forces in Turkey started advanced preparations for a major and a regular military surge. And it said that initial meetings for this took place in a bunker at the headquarters of the Free Syrian Army. Now, we tried to get out of Brooks Newmark whether he was actually present in that bunker. He didn't want to answer. And these are the questions he still hasn't answered. In what capacity, official or private, did you meet Syrian Free Army General Idris? Who was present in that meeting? Was this meeting sanctioned by David Cameron? If not, who did sanction it? What exactly do you know about the links between the forces of General Idris and al-Qaeda? Are you aware that al-Qaeda is a terrorist organisation? Who paid for this trip and meeting? And of course, true to the Conservatives' opaque transparency policy of Cabinet Minister Francis Maude, we have received no answers. Justin, I think we've got... I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, so I've got a number of
points
to make here.
Good.
So
please
go on to the next one. Yesterday, David Cameron was asked about the Srebrenica genocide, and he said it was the largest act of genocide since the Holocaust on the mainland of Europe. As he said, 8,300 people murdered. The first thing is to be very clear: it was genocide, and to say to people who question that are genocide deniers. So that's a very interesting statement from David Cameron, because the first thing he does is that he associates Srebrenica with the World War II Holocaust, and then he uses the term denier. So he is implying that anybody that denies that Srebrenica was a genocide by the Serbs on the Muslim population there are genocide deniers. That's quite an incredible thing, isn't it, Brian?
It is incredible, and of course we look at, well, the figures are in the millions of people who've died in the Middle East as a result of Tony Blair, Gordon Brown's and Cameron's policies. That is genocide in these unlawful overseas wars. I think this government's getting very frightened that it's becoming so easy to see what their true colours are. He's having to make up propaganda himself now on the spot. If you dare criticise us, you're a Holocaust denier. It's a pretty cheap Conservative trick, I think, Mike.
Yeah, so this was during Prime Minister's questions yesterday that he said this. He went on to say, we've been holding the pen to the United Nations in drafting the resolution that will bring the world together to make sure it is remembered in the right way. He's talking about Srebrenica, remembered in the right way, and we should be doing everything we can to keep this at the front and centre of European politics so that people realise that this was a genocide, and we must learn the lessons from it. So how does this link with what you've just said about Newmark? Well, of course, we'll come on to that in a second. I just want to say, if we look at the next one, Russia unfortunately vetoed that attempt to get the United Nations Security Council resolution passed, and so that's unfortunately David Cameron has not managed to get that through. The Russian United Nations Ambassador Vitaly Cherkin appealed for the Council not to vote on the resolution. He described it as not constructive, confrontational, and politically motivated. Now, if we just go on to the next one, then, of course, Yugoslavia, if we remember, in the 1990s was torn apart by various wars of secession. And in Bosnia in 1992, the Islamist secessionists had started a rebellion against, supported by the United States and Germany. And so, again, we've got secessionists in a sovereign nation being supported by the United States and Germany. The media at that time claimed that the Serbs were really hated the Muslims. Of course, that wasn't quite true. In fact, most Muslims in Bosnia at the time were loyal to Yugoslavia. So the Serbs in the Western media were labelled the new Nazis, and the Muslims were labelled rebels. But the secessionist Muslims, they were labelled moderate Democrats. So the people that wanted to break the country up were labelled the moderate Democrats. The people that wanted to hold the country together were called Nazis, and they were called rebels. And just a reminder that the majority of Muslims at the time wanted the country to stay together. Now, in order to sort of obtain Western support for Western action in Bosnia, they sent Penny Marshall in, and she was working for ITN, and she shot a film. And if we go on to the next one, this has got to be one of the most famous photographs, images from that time. And this was shot by Penny Marshall and ITN. And if we just move on to the next one, I just want to highlight this video. I'm not making any judgment on this video called Judgment, but I do recommend that everybody goes and watches this and makes a decision for themselves about whether that ITN report, which was really the basis of everything that happened afterwards in Yugoslavia, whether that report by ITN was a genuine report or whether it was an absolutely blatant piece of propaganda. I have my own view. I think you probably know by now what that is. But do watch that video and try to understand how so-called Islamic terrorism is being manipulated and has been for 20 or 30 years by the United States, by Britain, and by the European nations.
And perhaps we should also remember, Mike, that of course President Putin has been saying that Western-sponsored agitators have been working the former Soviet bloc, and in particular in Ukraine, stirring up trouble. And we've talked about the work of British BBC Media Action, the so-called charity of the BBC, in subversion, undermining the governments of nation states. Justin, I think we've got you with us.
Hello there, yes.
I don't know whether you were able to hear that report as we worked through, but if you wanted to comment, please do.
Well, I'm just going to say, we've always had our doubts about what happened in the old Yugoslavia, and we didn't always believe the reports we were getting. And as I said, once you know about the clash of civilizations, which I mentioned last time, and you know that all sorts of wheeling and dealing and manipulations go on behind the scenes, and that, I mean, I know a friend in Special Forces who met the whole of Al-Qaeda when they were fighting the Russians, and they were best of pals. So, you know, I don't believe anything any longer, and nothing surprises me.
We'll say you don't believe anything that comes through the establishment.
The establishment,
qualify that.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so you're with us today to give us an update to that budget of pain by George Osborne,
yes.
the man who was busy, or family were busy making a little bit of money out of a little bit of property deals.
6 million or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, just run through the Virgin Islands, but that's only taxes, little people. What took place in Westminster?
Right, well, I'd first of all like to start by thanking the people who came. We had just the right number because we were not considered a threat by the police. There were about 20 of us, and I would like to say a big thank you because some of them came from a long way away. And in particular, I'd like to thank Adrian, if he's watching, because he actually brought with him a wonderful, genuine, original Bradbury pound with the John Bradbury signature. It's probably the second batch, I think. And he and I, because there was just the right number, I strolled into the media centre on College Green, and we we went round talking to various people and showing them the note to show that this is not some conspiracy theory. This is factual. Here's the money that was actually issued by the Treasury in the First World War, and we could be doing the same again. And I think that gave us credibility as we went round. So yes, no, the whole day was a great success. We gave out probably in the region of 700 leaflets, different types of leaflets. We had little mini posters. Yes, we had an interesting. I met Shirley Williams. I haven't met her since the Crosby by-election, when I was standing by her side when she was elected as an SDP MP way back in the early 80s. But she was bemused by the Bradbury and suggested that we should go and see the BBC, because they, being jolly good people, they'll probably give us some coverage on the Bradbury. So I rather let it lie there. But she has agreed to correspond. But I met two lords, and my gosh, they're obviously Conservative lords. They had their pinstripes on. They had the Eton accent. And when I said, well, can I just ask you, either of you heard of the Bank for International Settlements? The answer was no. So I don't know what to make of that. And they were a bit bemused when I told them that it controlled something like 95% of the global money supply, and that it was, had 60 central banks under its wing, including the Bank of England. And they looked a little bit nonplussed. They were a bit taken aback. We had a very nice discussion with the police. As I said, the police were very low key. They allowed us to do what we liked. And we had very friendly discussions, and they were very interested in the Bradbury. Morale is low in the police. They're fed up with being all the cutbacks, and they were very, they were receptive. And they all took leaflets, and they all went away and said they were going to research. So that was good. But the most important thing that happened was that towards the end, and as I said, we were giving out leaflets left, right, and centre. We did notice there weren't very high-profile names coming through to College Green, rather like we noticed last time. So I'm just wondering, possibly, that word got out that the Bradbury people were waiting to receive the well-known, perhaps cabinet ministers and so forth. So that we didn't see very many. But I saw Douglas Carswell, the UKIP MP, doing something on College Green with one of the camera crews and one of the smaller TV stations, and I allowed him to finish. And when he was looking around, he's going to stroll off, I went up and said, Douglas, hello there. And I started off, because we actually both went to the same school, so we had something in common. I said, we've got something in common, we've both been to the same school, etc. And he said, oh, right, yes, Bradbury, listen, I'm not here today. I get your emails, and I'm not here today to discuss money reform, and it's not the day to do it. And now, if you'll just allow me to go about my business. And it was very abrupt. And I thought, this is not good, because I was genuinely going to be, I thought I view UKIP as our natural allies. I think I view them as our friends, because we all want a sovereign nation. So I just managed to say, well, look, can I just say, Douglas, for a sovereign nation, you've got to have a sovereign money supply, free from the bankers. Now, excuse me, you allow me to go about my business. And with that, he set off at a great pace. Almost, it was, somebody remarked, he looked like a ministry of silly walks. He set off and just didn't want to talk at all.
Sounds as though you disturbed him, Justin, by asking a pretty penetrating question, a very simple subject. This aggression that comes up is usually a sign of cognitive dissonance. You've actually caused them some trouble. Isn't it remarkable that UKIP's MP should not be interested in how to solve 95% of this nonsense with the control from Europe and the international banks?
Well, I've been sleeping on it, and I've been trying to work out in my mind that what happened there, because I genuinely thought we were going to have a few minutes, because I understand that they are very busy on budget day, and being the only MP, he's probably running around doing different things. But I thought at least we'd probably get 2 or 3 minutes just to have a civil conversation about the Bradbury. But we both know that the leadership of UKIP have a problem with the Bradbury. Nigel Farage doesn't want to know the Bradbury, any shape or form, and his immediate circle don't seem to want to know. And Douglas Carswell is obviously part of that immediate circle. But I was sleeping on it last night because the whole thing seemed so strange and completely unexpected. I mean, he may have just been having a bad day at the office. But, you can't excuse such rudeness, because it was rudeness. It was not something I found particularly pleasant. And it displayed arrogance, and I think it displayed this feeling that they are not our servants, MPs. I did have 2 or 3 MPs walk past me and refuse to take a leaflet in an extremely high-handed and arrogant fashion. But there again, I suppose we're rather used to that. But in the case of Douglas, I was sleeping on it, and I'm beginning to feel that perhaps, he is scared, perhaps scared of the implications of the Bradbury, because after all, the City of London and others, those who are enslaving us, the world, with unlawful debt, etc. Perhaps he's scared about the implications, and he's probably scared of Nigel Farage. I mean, we know that Nigel Farage has got quite a casualty list of people who have been quite close to him, and then for one reason or another, they seem to have either resigned or been chucked out of the party or whatever. And I don't know. Perhaps Douglas is scared of Nigel. I just don't know.
Well, Justin, maybe what's required is a nice polite letter from the British Constitution Group to Mr. Carswell to ask for a more detailed explanation. But I just need to move us on slightly as the clock's ticking. And Mike's got some comments himself about what the government's been up to with funding.
Well, of course, as a general statement about the budget, it of course is going to end up reducing people's standards of living right across the board. But despite what they say about this so-called living wage, but anyway, one of the things that they did highlight was a further £10 billion for the health service. Now, what was interesting was that in the Prime Minister's questions again, which just took place just before the budget speech, David Cameron was asked about the National Health Service, and particularly about a case of a family who were waiting on NICE, the very nice organisation which decides which drugs are available on the National Health Service. He was asked a question about a decision that NICE are waiting to make on a particular treatment for a particular illness. Now, I can't remember what the illness was. Doesn't really matter. What we need to know that it was a rare illness. And Cameron's response was, he basically didn't answer the question, as you would imagine, but he said, "These are incredibly difficult decisions, and we know how hard they are for patients and for families. I think it is right that it is expert clinicians at NHS England and not politicians who make these funding decisions based on the evidence that's available. When we have these drugs which cost over £400,000 per patient per year, I think it's right to ask some pretty challenging questions of the companies concerned." Now, of course, it is always right to ask challenging questions of drugs companies about how much they're charging for drugs, but that's not really the point here, is it? And he went on to say, we should keep investing in rare disease research and genomics and ensure that the NHS takes up these treatments rapidly. That's the sort of NHS we want to build. But of course, they're not taking these drugs up rapidly, and they're not really doing any realistic, sensible work on these rare diseases. And really what he's saying is that £400,000 per patient per year is too much. Really, I don't know, is he saying they just need to die? I'm not quite sure. So, as I say, he completely failed to answer the question, but he does tell us some things. I've just pointed out one. It's much less expensive to have somebody who is too expensive to give treatment to. It's much better to have them in a wheelchair, perhaps, and on disability benefit, because that's less expensive at the end of the day. But £10 billion for the health service. It's where is that money going?
It's going to go straight into the pockets of the private companies that have already taken over the health service. Because of course that is the biggest lie by David Cameron, that there is no privatisation.
Yes, and then just bring this back to defence here for a second, because the other thing that came out of the budget was that Britain is signing up to the 2% defence of GDP defence spending target for the security of the realm, apparently. But in addition, Osborne announced a joint security fund of £1.5 billion a year, and that would be created by the end of the Parliament to pay for increased spending on the military and intelligence agencies. But what was interesting from the budget speech was that it was going to be given to the organisations which were displaying the best efficiencies. So what this extra £1.5 billion seems to be doing to me, Brian, is basically setting the various services off against each other and almost putting them in competition with each other for the money. And of course, that's never a good thing.
Never a good thing, Mike, and a game that was played to great effect between the military over the years. So you play the Army, the Navy and the RAF off against each other. We're just seeing a pack of lies by Britain's Conservative government becoming ever more clear. China taking a bit of a dive, though.
Indeed. Chinese stock market taking a bit of a dive, but it all may not be quite what it seems. Now, of course, every country, even China, has a financial element to it, not very nice financial element to it. And unfortunately, the Chinese population have been sucked into putting huge quantities of money into the stock market. That's created a bubble, but actually that bubble may have been deliberately burst. So the Chinese yesterday took steps to stop the stock market collapse continuing, but quite worrying steps in a way, because what's happened is, to quote here, to restore the market to normal, China's securities finance will continue to stabilize the share prices of blue chips while increasing the buying of small and medium-sized company stocks in a bid to calm the nervous market situation. So what they seem to be doing is pumping money in order to try to keep the prices up, and that seems like a pretty big mistake. But this gentleman, Ding Yifan, he made some comments because he's pretty unconvinced about what's actually been going on. He said trying to pour money into the stock market is no solution. We can't follow the example of Federal Reserve with QE2 and 3. He said we must instead investigate if there have been any malicious operations conducted by certain investors. Our securities regulations forbid such operations, but these regulations aren't properly implemented. If there were violations, the violators must be punished. And of course, George Soros' name comes straight to mind, because he was the person that collapsed the pound by selling it short in the 1980s. There's this type of shenanigans. As we know, the BRICS conference is going on at the moment. Undoubtedly, this is some kind of attack on China and on their stock market going on at the moment.
Okay, we will watch that develop in due course. Justin, just a quick final word, and I believe you've got Eric Pickles back with you again.
Yes, he's the mascot of the movement. Hello, boy. Yes, I'd just like to say to people, after what I said with Douglas Carswell, all those people who watch our programme, who are members of UKIP, please approach their leadership and ask why they're not embracing the whole principle of national credit and making Britain a truly independent country, free from the debt-creating bankers. And it would be nice just to sort of put some pressure on the leadership, because I just don't understand why they're not with us on this one. I really don't understand.
Yeah, okay, we'll do some digging, but very good point. If you're a member of UKIP, perhaps you'd help us out by writing into your leadership yourself to ask the key question. Well, we'll end on a positive note. Thank you very much to all of the people who helped organise the Glastonbury talk last night. Great pleasure to attend, and some wonderful talks. John Hurst talking about the Section 151 officers and stashed cash in local authorities. Sandy talking about Agenda 21 and the dangers of that massive United Nations programme. And we finished on a slightly spiritual note from myself. But wonderful to see people active, doing just the right thing, getting people together, educating, and getting some community spirit up at the same time. So thank you very much for the invite. That's it for today. Thank you for joining us. I say once again, if you like what we do, please consider taking a subscription or perhaps making a donation. It's only with your help that we can do what we do. Thanks very much. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.